Hi there folks, and welcome back to the channel. Now, my first Battlebit video did surprisingly well, so in this video I'll be going back to Battlebit and covering some of the tips and tricks I've learned from my first few days with the game. This will be information aimed at beginners, but I'd be willing to bet that there's still some of you out there that have been playing since release and might not know a few of these things already. So if you find the video useful, consider dropping it a like and subscribing for more tips, tricks, and guides just like this one. So, you're jumping into Battlebit for the first time. Let's start with a couple of basics that can dramatically increase your enjoyment you'll get out of the game. Firstly, the ping system is an incredibly useful tool, especially when you're in a squad that's communicating with each other. By default, this is bound to middle mouse button press and will leave a ping on the target location. You can combine this with communicating with your squad, what you are pinging, say an enemy soldier, and what compass bearing it is from you. Pinging a target becomes even more important when it's an enemy vehicle that you're looking at, as the ping will attach to the target and will move with the vehicle, which allows your anti-tank or allied vehicles to track them down through terrain. This is incredibly helpful when they're trying to chase an enemy vehicle down. Pinging is the quickest and most effective way to work with your squad and call out enemy positions. If you're not a fan of the amount of symbols that are cluttering your screen, however, or want to make certain ones stand out, there's some settings in-game that can be used to reduce, increase, or change the color of various icons. This is under the gameplay tab of the settings page. Personally, I chose to increase the size of pings and change the color of friendly icons to stand out a little bit less when I'm moving around, whilst reducing their size so my UI isn't cluttered. Whilst there wasn't a tutorial for Battlebit when the game was first launched, a tutorial was added just after the launch as part of the shooting range. You can use the shooting range to test out various weapons, including ones that you haven't unlocked yet, with any attachments you want. The tutorial will teach you the absolute basics of the game and can be a good tool for fresh players jumping in for the first time. Now, whilst we're touching on weapons and the mechanics associated, it's worth noting that unlike many shooters, your weapon doesn't draw from a larger pool of ammunition that magically stays the same when you reload. Instead, your magazines are individually filled, and partially used magazines will filter back into your spare magazines. You can hold P to combine ammunition from these magazines into fewer but more topped up mags, which will serve you better in a firefight. You can also use the Alt key to turn your head independently of your body when on the move, which can be useful for scanning an area, and you can press H to check the bullet count on your current magazine. Most importantly of all though, if you hold R, you'll perform a tactical reload. This is faster than a regular reload, but you drop the magazine on the ground. It can be used to great effect in a pinch when you know enemies are close or when the magazine is completely empty. But remember that you won't be able to reacquire that magazine from a resupply crate if you've dropped it. You can, however, go back to where you dropped the magazine and pick it up off the floor if you want to by holding F. When it comes to your character, there's no way to customize your loadout or appearance outside of actual games at the moment. I've got a feeling that this is something we might see changed in the future, but until then, your loadout and character customization can be found at the bottom left of your screen when selecting a spawn. The most important thing to know here is that your character menu isn't just for good looks. It can also affect the amount of magazines you carry for both your primary and secondary weapon, the amount of grenades and gadgets you can carry, and most importantly, how much armor you have and how fast you move. You can even choose to forego a helmet if you want to increase your aim-in speed. It's ultimately up to you which you choose, so have a mess around and see what works best for you. It's also worth noting that the support gets a couple of extra options that will give you a lot more armor and thus more damage resistance, but slow your movement as a trade-off. Now, it should go without saying really, but Battlebit is not a solo game, it's a squad game. You can join a squad and work together to complete objectives. With that in mind, you will always have a better experience with Battlebit if you stick with your squad. Work together, follow your squad leader's attack or defend orders if they are giving any, and don't be afraid to leave combat once in a while to give your squad mates a spawn location. Now, they cannot spawn on you if you're on a capture point that's contested by the enemy, close to the enemy, or exchanging fire with the enemy, so you might need to back off once in a while to provide your team a spawn. You gain 1000 points for changing a capture point status, and an extra 1000 points if it's marked by your squad leader. You get 200 points just for a squad mate spawning on you, so it's worth your while to work with them as much as it's helpful for them for you to do so. Whilst we're touching touching on spawn points briefly as well, one trick we learned is that you can leave a vehicle just at the edge of the spawn zone associated to your team and it will still work as a spawn point, as if it were located at the main HQ. This can be handy to get you back into the fight quickly if the enemy team has pushed you back to your spawn, or you're on a smaller, more condensed map. Regular squads are 8 players in size, but if you're part of a clan and are playing with your clanmates, you can start a clan squad where only they will be able to join you, but it will allow up to 12 players in a squad, which can give you a big leg up in a firefight. So it might be worth joining a clan if you're putting a considerable amount of time into the game and are up for socializing with others. This leads me nicely into a core mechanic that all players need to know about Battlebit. Support actions are almost always worth more points and more XP than offensive actions. Killing someone in Battlebit gives you about 200 points, plus maybe a bonus for a headshot, but reviving someone will give you 200 points, plus the points on top for healing them after the revive, which totals to about 700 points, assuming that no other medics get involved. I've had games as a medic where I've placed within the top 5 players with less than 10 kills, but with over 60,000 points, just from the amount of healing and revives I've been dishing out all the game. Giving people ammo from the support class is also incredibly strong for gaining points, so in essence, don't neglect those support roles. They are fantastic for gaining XP, so you'll level at lightning speeds, and your squad is going to love you for it too. I'd hope this sort of goes without saying as well, but if you go down in a firefight, please don't give up instantly. Wait to see if there is a medic nearby, or someone else for that matter, that can pick you up. Use your best judgment of the situation based on how chaotic it is. If you think someone can get to you, wait and save your team that ticket. If you think people will be at risk trying to grab you, maybe it's best to give up and you'll hopefully have saved a medic from dying trying to get to you. Oh, and if a medic picks you up, don't sit there and look at them whilst they heal you. Instead, turn your gun outwards and cover the medic so that you're not an easy double kill for the enemy if they decide to push. Quite often, the enemy will push someone if they think they are downed, so be ready and keep your medic protected whilst they work. Now, if you want to tackle being a medic yourself, and it's quite a good thing to do for beginners, there's a couple of things to know. Firstly, you should always try to finish patching someone up entirely before moving on. You get 50 bonus points for healing somebody fully, so it's just worth it in that respect, and ensures that they are at peak fighting fitness before moving on. If you instead choose to revive a bunch of people and leave them at low health, they've less chance to defend themselves, and one well-placed grenade could ruin all your plans. Next up, this isn't one that's exclusive to medics, but is definitely a really helpful tool when you're playing one. Bring some smoke grenades. Smoke grenades in Battlebit are incredibly effective and put out a massive plume of smoke, which can give your team cover on an advance, or when you're playing a medic, give you cover when healing downed teammates. Seriously, I know most people would opt for frag grenades because of the kill opportunities, but you need to give these a go. You'll get so much use out of them. If you're picking up a downed friendly, and it's worth mentioning anyone can do this, not just medics, you can drag the person back into cover by using the F key by default. You can only drag when crouched or standing. You can bandage whilst dragging someone too, so if you're dragging someone back into cover, start bandaging them on the move. With that in mind, you might also want to bind your drag key to the same button as your bandage key to combine the two actions, but that's personal preference really. Now, if the medic life really isn't for you though, the best way to gain offensive XP that I've found so far is from destroying enemy vehicles. You can get absolutely ridiculous amounts of points, albeit on an irregular basis, from destroying vehicles, especially if you've got a crew of people inside them at the time they explode. You can rack up thousands of points from a single vehicle kill if you play your cards right. If you're going up against tanks, try to make sure you're landing RPGs on either their side or rear armor. This is going to do double the damage than if you hit them on the front side of the tank. Oh, and if you weren't aware already, RPGs are just as effective at knocking holes in walls or killing people that are using hard cover like walls. If you see someone shooting out of a window, don't be afraid to hit that window with an RPG. There are also additional types of RPG round. You'll start with heat rounds, which is the middle ground, whereas fragmentation is exclusively for infantry use, and the tandem rounds do massive damage to armored targets. You'll unlock these later, but it's good to know what they do in advance. Now, if you choose to use the 3 seats. The first seat is the driver and user of the main gun. The second seat is a spotter seat with a thermal sight, which is incredibly underused and underrated. The third sight is a machine gun turret mounted to the top of the tank. Try to fill all 3 of these slots, but otherwise, just having a gunner with you will make your life much easier. Also, keep in mind that in the main battle tanks, you have the ability to deploy smoke with Q by default, and you can change round types as well. Armor-piercing rounds are for vehicles, and high explosive are for infantry. Just keep in mind that changing these rounds will take some time. It's always better, generally, to have armor-piercing loaded at the start of a round when you know enemy vehicles are going to be present, and then switch them out later. You can always use right-click for your coax machine gun if you need to kill some infantry in a pinch. For the LAV or BTR, you only need one person to operate it effectively. They are both the driver and the gunner, but there's a bunch of other seats for transportation use as well. Engineers can repair vehicles with a repair tool, but as you take damage, the total health they can repair will reduce gradually. This lost health can only be recovered by returning to your team's HQ, along with restocking your ammo, which also requires a drive back to the HQ. If you're interested in vehicle combat, try to use them as a support tool. Do not think that you can rush into enemy lines and punch a hole through their defenses. The chances are that you're going to eat a whole lot of RPG fire and get yourself killed within seconds. Instead, let your infantry push ahead and try to place them between you and the enemy lines. This is going to make it a lot harder for enemy engineers to approach you and force them to take long-range shots, which might be able to be avoided if you're quick enough. It also makes for an easier retreat if you take some damage. Both vehicle types can zoom their weapon by using the scroll wheel, so sitting at a distance isn't a huge problem. Lastly, watch out for players trying to place C4 on you, and try not to stay still for too long. A few C4 is all it takes and is by far the most effective way to counter vehicles in Battlebit, since the driver has no time to react to the damage. Now, forewarning, I'm no expert when it comes to flying helicopters, so I can't give many tips there, but I can give a couple of beginner tips for those riding shotgun. If you're flying in a helicopter as an engineer, keep in mind that you can repair the helicopter from the inside. It's a good way to earn points, keeps your helicopter alive whilst transporting troops, and the pilot will no doubt thank you for it. On a similar note, you can bandage when inside a vehicle just as you would normally. You don't need to dismount for this. The only other thing you need to know is that there are no parachutes in this game, like in some of the Battlefield games. If you want to dismount from a flying helicopter, you'll need to wait for the pilot to deploy a rappelling rope. You can latch on, slide down, and await your drop from the rope, or wait inside the chopper and slide down when they hover near a drop point. It's up to you and the pilot's discretion on that one. Just don't jump out without the rappelling symbol on your screen, or you'll become a low poly pancake. That's it for me in this one, folks, but if you have any tips and tricks that you think are worth sharing with other players, let me know in the comments section of this video. I'd love to hear from you guys and use it as a place to share information with other members of the community. A very special thank you to all of my Patreon supporters for their unwavering support for my content and my channel, and I hope you all have a fantastic time with Battlebit. I will see you all in the next one.